Hi, and welcome to Creatives on Speed, where we talk to creative thinkers and doers and makers from all walks of life about their lives, careers, and inspirations. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Andrew Boulton. Andrew is a senior copywriting lecturer and also an amazing copywriter himself in his own right. Hi, Andrew.
Oh, hello.
Hi. So tell us a little bit about what you do and what your week looks like as you juggle these two roles that you have.
So I got into lecturing. I teach at the University of Lincoln on the creative advertising degree course there. Yay, Lincoln. And I got into that entirely by accident. I certainly bumbled into it. I'd always been a copywriter, working at various agencies and sort of doing my own freelance thing. At the last agency I worked at, I met a pal of mine who left to go and run the program here at Lincoln, and he got me in to do a few bits and bobs. And I was never one of those people who felt that sort of, teaching or sort of passing on your knowledge to the next generation was worthwhile. I couldn't be bothered with that. Fuck young people. Sorry for swearing. But I, in my first sort of few sessions, I absolutely loved it. It was a really, it sounds really, wanky, but it was a transformative moment, because it felt like, this is brilliant, being able to talk about this thing you do and love, and surrounded by these young people who desperately want to know about it, and they're really excited by getting into this world. And when the chance came to join the course full time, I thought, brilliant, this is probably an unexpected direction for me, but something that I get a huge amount of kind of joy out of. So my week is very much based on spending time with the students. We operate as if we were a studio. We don't really operate in a traditional academic kind of way. It's not big lecture theatres and me standing at the front and sort of talking to them for an hour. We operate as if we were a real advertising studio, a real creative studio. So we set briefs, we get them to present their work. We do live crits where everyone is expected to kind of have a view and sort of challenge and defend your work. And we use that studio space as much as we can to try and kind of develop ideas. And I think fundamentally it's an ideas course. We try our best to kind of instill a lot of the craft, a lot of the kind of the discipline that comes with being a creative. But we want them to be good thinkers. We want them to be interesting and surprising and original thinkers. And a lot of the time it's kind of saying, we don't almost want to see you in this studio. We don't want to see you in this building all the time. We want you to be out in the world. We want you to go and kind of understand people and get your inspiration and stimulation from wherever you possibly can. So in a way, I don't think my superiors at the university would like me saying this, but we run quite a chaotic course, but it's deliberately chaotic, which is good, because I couldn't operate in a way that was anything less than chaotic. And it is just about, how can we make you more interesting and more interested, and how can we almost broaden your creative horizons and just, make you a more courageous creative, make you someone who's willing to do that weird thing and take those risks and present an idea that feels absolutely bonkers, and it might win and it might not. But, I'm much more interested in the scary stuff than the stuff I've seen, every single year.
That sounds great. And I also just want to come on the course myself. It sounds really exciting. So let's go back, because there's lots in there we can dig into, and I'll come back to some of those points. But let's go back to when you were growing up. What sort of creative activities or things were you getting into when you were growing up?
I think it was, I was one of those children who very much kind of just lived in my imagination. And it wasn't a lonely or unhappy time. It was brilliant. That was the stuff I liked to do, and writing was always the thing I was drawn to. I can't draw. I can't kind of make any kind of visual art. I'm probably worse at it now than I was when I was 8, which is probably true for a lot of people. But writing was always the thing where I felt like, this is what I want to do. But when you go to school, when you go to sort of do your A-levels, and this is a massive kind of bugbear of mine, nobody says that there's this job called copywriting. No one says there's a job where you can go out and you can have ideas and you can find the best way to kind of express them through words, and people will pay you to do that. And for us, it was, if you want to do writing, well, off you go and do English literature somewhere at a university, and then kind of make it up from there. You might go into journalism, you might write a bad novel in your 20s that goes nowhere. But I can't give you a way to kind of go and make money and have fun and kind of really develop your writing and your craft. And like almost every single copywriter I know, I totally stumbled into it. I was in traveling in Australia, and I got a job. I got a job writing football reports for a newspaper in Melbourne. And I went and wrote these reports that were about 500 words longer than I was allowed to write, and got shouted at by an Australian editor, which was frightening. But I loved it, and I thought, okay, this is a job where people want you to write and they pay you to do it. And it got me thinking about, when I come back to the UK, what can I do? What can I find? So just by searching writer on career sites, you come up with all sorts of things, medical writers and different sort of technical kind of writing. But I found this job called copywriting at a credit card company called Egg. I don't know if you remember them.
I do. I had an Egg card. Yes,
everyone did.
Yeah.
Bought by about 4 or 5 different people.
Yeah.
But it was a really brilliant brand, and at the time it was quite a daring brand. It was really different for the financial sector, so it was kind of the perfect place to go and sort of work in this internal agency. And still probably one of the happiest and funnest and weirdest jobs like I ever had in my whole career. But it was totally by accident. I went in, I had nothing really in my portfolio to show apart from some spec stuff I'd done, some of this kind of reporting stuff I'd done in Australia. And I got lucky enough, the guy there was willing to take a chance on me. And I accidentally found myself in copywriting and haven't really left since. So even now, sort of the teaching, I still maintain kind of copywriting, a handful of copywriting clients as freelance, because I'm not sure I could do this job. I'm not sure I could teach other people how to write copy and be creative with words if I wasn't doing it myself still.
I think that's true. And also just from a pure kind of industry perspective as well, because I've certainly had a lot of chat on other courses that there's a lot of like teaching them sort of the basics of advertising and how things work. But, that sort of that face-to-face industry experience that you've got and still have, so vital for them to understand how the sort of, those little technical bits of how the industry works, the highs and lows of it as well, you need to understand to sort of like, keep your career going and keep it fresh. Just to talk about that thing about copywriting when you found it by accident. I think what's really interesting is something you said about being creative. If people think about being creative with words, they all often just think about being a novelist, being a screenwriter, being that kind of creative writer. And they don't think about advertising, because I think a lot of people think, oh, that's a route for a graphic designer. So I've got to be able to draw or use a computer like to design. So I think that's fascinating that you sort of like hit home on that. I really like resonate with that. Moving on to something you've been doing recently, which I was really excited about on LinkedIn, that you put a call out to, or you did a blog post a while back about some of the subjects you've been talking about, and you've put together this guide for English teachers. Is that right? Tell us a bit more about that.
So I wrote a blog on Medium, which I only discovered Medium sort of this year, and I absolutely love it. I'm always rattling things off on there, but I wrote this thing that had been a real kind of pain point for me, I think, certainly since I kind of joined the course, that I feel like we as an industry, as copywriters, we're kind of missing out on a huge kind of potential generation of talent who would desperately want to do the stuff we do, and who would want to be aiming towards that from a relatively young age, but they don't know what it is. And that isn't the fault of kind of English teachers or the colleges. It's the fault of the industry, I think. It's our responsibility as writers to kind of pass down the word. There's this thing happening, and it's great. And if someone would have told me at 16, here's this job where you go and create, you write interesting things, you're kind of experiencing all kinds of different styles and tones of writing, that would have kind of rung a bell for me. And I would have thought, okay, whatever I need to do is my next steps, I'm going to do that, because that's what I want to feel like I want to be aiming towards. And you're absolutely right. At that age, it's creative writing careers are considered to be in the arts, in the media. And I've always thought that copywriting is a much more viable and just as fun and just as creative career for people who want to make money out of words. So I wrote this piece on Medium, got some really brilliant feedback, including from some people who were saying, I've got some friends who are teachers, and I think I've sent this to them, and they're really interested. So I put together this really sort of scruffy PowerPoint card using my visual skills. And I sent it out to a few people, and I put a thing on LinkedIn saying, I've done this thing. It's an introduction to what copywriting is and how you might want to get into it, how your students might want to get into it. If anyone wants it, it's there, it's free, please pass it on far and wide. Thinking that I'd be maybe sending out 6 of them over the course of a month. And we sent it out, I think, we almost at 200.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's become a part-time job. It's the hardest I've worked since I was a paper boy. Because I'm constantly replying to people saying, I'm really sorry this has taken so long. Here's this guide, please pass it on. So the response to it has been brilliant. And it's coming from the education sector. It's coming from people who are like, I didn't know about this. And, I teach writing, and I teach, I try and instill a love of words and writing in my students. And I'd love to be able to give them a more practical direction. So that it's 200. It's a relatively small success, but it's compared to kind of where we were, and me in particular, just sitting here grumbling about it, but not actually doing anything about it. I feel like we've got the ball rolling slightly with that. And what we see on the course overwhelmingly is that it's a creative advertising course. It's not a course designed to kind of create art directors specifically. It's to make you a well-rounded, ad creative and a creative thinker. But overwhelmingly, it's kids with visual backgrounds and visual skills, photography students, graphic students, fine art students. And they're great and they're brilliant, but, they're not generally as comfortable with the written side of things. I'd love us to be at a more balanced place where we're getting the kids in from English and the sort of the essay writing A levels, and just to try and get those people who are coming in who are already have that kind of foundation and love of words and, love of, the beginning of starting to explore what you can do with words and what the possibilities are. And that's kind of my dream, is to get more copywriters on the course.
Yeah, so obviously the guide is, I'm guessing it's still available if people want to get hold of it.
It absolutely is. Please kind of email me or message me on Twitter or LinkedIn, whatever. And then about 6 weeks later, when I've actually managed to get my arse into gear, I will send you a copy. But no, please, the more we can get out, the better.
Yeah, we'll be putting some links to you in the show notes below. So in terms of your creative inspiration, because obviously, whether you're designing a lecture or you're doing copywriting yourself, what sort of tools and tricks do you tend to gravitate to keep you inspired?
It's kind of evolved. And I think the stuff that I tell the students to do at the moment is absolutely the stuff I did when I was younger. And it is read. That is the fundamental thing. I don't think you can not only write creatively but express yourself creatively unless you're consuming a lot of creative stimulation, and I feel like books reading is still the kind of primary source of where that comes from. And I get them to read a lot of kind of ad books and books about creativity. We've got a few books on our reading list that I would consider to be absolutely essential reading for what we do. And off the top of my head, Whipple, Hey Whipple, Squeeze This, still feels like the most relevant and valuable text in terms of becoming an ad creative there is. There is a book on copywriting specifically called Read Me by a man who I actually know, Giles Lingwood. So I'm really reluctant to push it and earn him more royalties, but it is sadly very, very good. So we get them to kind of read that. The ad concept book is what I'd say, I say to students, you'll buy this book and it'll be sitting on your desk, heavily tattered and thumbed in a 10 years time, because it's that useful and it's that valuable. But my own process has kind of evolved, and reading is still, massively a part of inspiring me to write good stuff. But more and more, I think it's partly, a massive character flaw of mine is I can't sit still for very long. I don't like being indoors. I don't like desks. I was never built to work in an office of any sort, which kind of explains why I've ended up doing, the jobs I've done in my career. I feel like getting outside is still the most kind of refreshing and stimulating thing that a creative can do. Going for a walk, seeing the sky, being somewhere where the temperature isn't regulated, where it can be cold, getting yourself lost, wandering, all of those things, being away from the environment in which you're expected to create, I feel is the most valuable thing you can do as a creative of any age. And I think too many of us kind of create our own confinement by saying that this is the studio, or this is the office, or this is the desk, this is the place where I am expected to work, so this is the place where I have to work and have to think. And these kind of palaces of thought that we've created for ourselves as agencies and studios, and any kind of building where creativity is expected to happen, I feel like that's a really self-defeating way for any creative of any kind of, discipline to work in. So being outside, being in the weather, being in the cold, getting rained on, I think all of that stuff is vitally important if you want to stay interesting and different and surprising as a creative thinker.
Yeah, it's totally true. I agree with all of that, and it's really exciting when you hear people sort of like having similar sort of thoughts and ideas, and getting out is so important for your mental health as well. And I think that, if you need to be in that positive frame of mind to have good ideas. Just in terms of like getting into the actual writing process itself, have you got any kind of sort of tips when people are kind of stuck for like how to sort of review their writing, or just kind of make it better in that sort of in that moment?
Yeah, sadly I can't claim them to be my own tips. They're all stolen tips from people who are far better at it than me. And there was always this sort of Hemingwayism of kind of he called the blank page the white bull, and because it was, the fear and the intimidation of being faced with this kind of blank page and not knowing what to put onto it. And so what we say to the students, what I do myself is you've just got to get some stuff out. And a lot of the time, the first things you write will be the ideas that come to you, instantly, the most obvious things. And the reason that they're most obvious is because they're familiar to you. You've seen them before. You've seen them done in slightly different ways. But just purely by going through the process of expelling that stuff from your mind, getting it out on the page, your first page should all be bad. And I think that's a fair rule to follow in a business that really shouldn't have any kind of rules attached to it. But your first page will all be pretty bad, or not necessarily bad, but at least unoriginal. But once it's out, and once you can see what that is, what you're left with is a clearer idea of what the possibilities are and what the opportunities are. And so once you've kind of got rid of all the stuff that feels you've done before, or cliched, or too obvious, or too easy to ignore, you know what you're writing against almost. You know what the kind of the opponent to this is. And once you've got something that you definitely don't want to write, your brief becomes clearer and your focus becomes a bit narrower in a good way, in a positive way. And you can start writing the different thing. You can start writing the thing that behaves in an entirely different way to the stuff you've already done, to that first page. So I think that's one really important thing. And there's a brilliant book. I'm looking on my bookshelves now to see if it's there. It's by Ray Bradbury, the author Ray Bradbury. It's called Zen in the Art of Writing. And he writes about how when you sit down to write, it's all about exploding. It's all about just not trying to control it, not trying to regulate it, just letting it all pour out. Don't even use punctuation. Don't use sentence structure. Just hammer at the keyboard or kind of write furiously with your pencil. Just let all of this stuff kind of pour out of you and stop when it stops, stop when it runs dry, and then walk away. Too many writers feel like the writing process and the editing process have to exist in the same moment. And that's again, one of the most self-defeating things you can do as any kind of creative writer. You've got to give it distance and you've got to give it time. And come back to it, and you can tidy it up, you can refine it, you can start to edit, and you can start to kind of make real shapes out of this kind of mess that you've poured out onto the page the day before. So we say to the students that almost the beginning and the end of a project, where you're thinking, you're gathering that inspiration, you're starting to create enough stimulation so you feel ready to write. And at the end, when you're kind of putting it all together and you're being really, really ruthless as an editor and you're tearing it to pieces and kind of restructuring it as something that will work, they're the most important bits. The bit in the middle where you're actually writing, where you're actually putting letters on a page, that's kind of inconsequential if you do the beginning and the end really, really well.
So such fantastic advice. I can't tell you. I like to refer to that first stage as the vomit draft.
Yeah.
Because you're literally like vomiting out of your head all the things that are in there, and then you've got to go back and clear it up. So
I think if you don't get all that stuff out on the page, then you will literally end up vomiting out of kind of creative panic.
That's a very good point. What's 2021 looking like for you with the course and any other projects you've got on?
Yeah, so the course has got kicked in the shins slightly in 2020, but we're very lucky that because of that chaos I kind of talked about at the start, that we've been able to kind of adopt and embrace kind of online teaching quite seamlessly, and I think the students have still been able to get a very kind of good creative experience. They've been able to kind of do all the things that we want them to do. They're just having to do it in a different environment. So we're desperate to get back into the studio full time. we shall wait and see when that unfolds. I've actually got a book, a copywriting book. Are you ready for a plug? I'm going to plug it.
Yeah, go for a plug. Absolutely.
Working with a brilliant publisher, Gasp. So they're an agency. They've also kind of started publishing creative books. And a lovely chap called Giles Edwards. Edit that out. I don't want him to know I think he's nice. And I wrote this book. It had always been one of those things that I'd really like to have written a book one day, but not actually do the work and effort and pain required to do it. But I forced myself to do it as sort of part of joining the university. I got it finished, and Giles was, kind enough to sort of take it on as a project, and he sort of poured his entire life into bringing it together. So we're going to get our students through to sort of the end of their year, and our third years are obviously kind of graduating into a world where they will be looking for crits and placements, and because of circumstances, we're going to do all we can to make sure that path is a bit kind of smoother for them. And just more interesting copy projects as well. I think, I said earlier, I feel like a fraud, I think, if I taught on this course and didn't actually do any writing or thinking myself. And it's not easy because everyone's got so much on, but I feel like, personally, in terms of my development, it's really important to kind of keep my hand in with the writing side of it. So I'm in a position now where I'm lucky enough to just take on stuff that feels fun. And there's a couple of projects I've worked on this year, which have been some of the most fun I've had. I can't actually say anything about them; they're top secret. But it's been some of the most fun I've had as a copywriter. So it's stuff like that. I'm looking for stuff that just makes me happy. My days of writing kind of Google text ads and email newsletters and endlessly kind of proofreading massive kind of terms and conditions documents are hopefully, for the time being, at least behind me, and I can choose stuff that just makes me smile.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good training though, that stuff.
Oh yeah,
you get very good attention to detail reading T's and C's.
I feel like proofreading was always, it was the thing that if I'd tried at, I would have been pretty poor at, and then I just couldn't bring myself to try it, so I was terrible at it. Having said that, I've had to proofread my own book. Yeah,
I was going to ask you that.
It was, well, it wasn't painful. I just did it so lazily. But I'm very lucky. A pal of mine, Dr. Ben, who I've known, for 25 years. He's a doctor in some kind of obscure English 17th century poetry, went to Oxford, and he knows spelling and grammar and words far better than almost any copywriter I know, to be honest. And he was kind enough to proofread it for me. And the draft that I got back after he finished was just heartbreaking. It was in a bad way, but
well, you got to be the student for once, with the red pen.
Sorry, Dr. Ben. I tried my best.
That's fantastic. Well, that sounds really, really exciting, and I hope we can maybe chat more or do something else when the book comes out, because I'd really like to talk more about that. So, but for now, I will let you go. Before we do go, though, where can everyone find you on social media?
So on Twitter, you will find me rambling away about anything. At the moment, it's talking a lot about the Queen's Gambit.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
On that. So you can find me on Twitter at Boultini, Boultini. I am on LinkedIn, just Andrew Boulton. But if you guys want to share my email for anyone who's interested in the guide, I will be delighted to send it out to anyone who wants it.
Sure, we'll do that. Well, Andrew, I'll let you get on with your day because I know you're off to do some teaching very shortly. So I'll let you get on with that. Thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thanks
for having me.
Bye.